And GPTs are basically just a customized chatbot that you can create pretty easily with ChatGPT, as long as you have a paid account. And we'll talk about that more in just a second. And here you can get a link to the slides, and I'm going to get some of the stuff off the screen. There we go. So, and did I put in a link? Oh yeah, and here we go. You could either type in the tiny URL, or you could scan that QR code and it would give you the link. And actually, let me just grab that. I'm going to copy the link address and I'm going to just pop it into the chat. Okay, so grab a copy of this. It'll give you the option of adding it to your Google Drive, which you can always delete later if you decide you don't want to keep it. But at least it will let you follow along with a little bit as we go. Okay, so everyone get it? Any questions? Any problems with that? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. So GPTs are custom chatbots, as I mentioned. And once you create one, you can share it with just yourself, so no one else gets to use it. And there's some use cases for that. For example, if you want to create a tool that you're going to use over and over again, but it's only of interest to yourself, you could keep it for your own use. You could also create it for anyone with a link, and that's probably something you'd use the most if you're going to create a tool that's going to be used only with students in a specific section of a class. So you create tools that are specific for a given class section. You probably don't want that to be a public one that other people could use, because it's only really going to be relevant within the framework of your class. Or if you're creating something that may be useful for your colleagues, you might only share it with your colleagues and just share the link with them. And then you just put that into Brightspace or whatever you're using, and then people could use it. Or you could make it public, and that would be important if you're going to create something that would be generally done if you create something that's of general interest, and then anyone can find it in the ChatGPT store, or anyone could find it in the ChatGPT store. So in order to create those, you need a paid account. However, until mid-semester, last semester, you used to need a paid account in order to be able to use the ChatGPT store or to use custom GPTs. And there's a missing parenthesis, sorry about that. But in any case, free users now have access to all of the custom GPTs, which means you can create tools for your students or your colleagues that they can use without having to pay for a ChatGPT account, which makes it which provides much more equitable access. And again, there's going to be some interesting use cases that we'll talk about more as we go. There are some limitations on the number of searches, the number of tokens that can be used, and so forth, with a free account. And also one other restriction is if people are using a free account, they won't be able to use DALL-E to generate graphics. So you can't really build a tool that's going to generate images if you want it to be available for people with a free account. So when might you use GPTs? The basic principle is that there's a task that either you are going to repeat or many of your colleagues are going to, because you could always use ChatGPT directly and plug in similar directions every time you use it. But there's a lot of times when you might be using the same tool over and over again. For example, suppose you're teaching a large class and you're using some type of polling software. One thing you could do is, and in fact, I did this earlier today, I'll show you how to do that, is to create a tool where students could, where you could use polls, download the results from that, which only takes a few seconds, open and have your custom GPT open, and just attach the poll results and generate a summary, which can all be done in just a few seconds. So if you want to get some real-time analysis of student responses, which would be really helpful if you have a very large class. Last year at CIT, who did that? Derek Bruff did this when he was analyzing responses. He ran them through ChatGPT, but he didn't have a custom GPT, so he had to put in some instructions for it. But if you have a custom GPT, you can have it open. And all you have to do is attach the file you download from the tool, and it will give you a nice summary of it. I know some people at Harvard have done this for evaluation, actually, of student comments in their classes, and they framed it so that what what happens is that they do sort of like a compliment sandwich, which we know is not ideal in terms of learning. But what it will do is it will give people a summary of their student evaluation, written comments from it, and then it will always end with a positive phrase at the end. So it leaves them feeling a little bit better. And one of the reasons why you might use it for something like that is, when you read through the comments, the ones that tend to stick with you are the negative comments. And you might ignore the fact that 95% or more of them are really positive, but this will give you a more neutral summary of all the evaluations and, provide perhaps some suggestions on how you might be able to address some of the feedback. If you want to create a chatbot that's trained on specific information, because we do know that, we don't know exactly what ChatGPT is trained on, except it seems to have been trained on pretty much anything that it could find. But if you want to provide tools for your students that are only trained on, say, resources specific to your class, you can do that. In fact, that's what we'll be demonstrating in just a few minutes. You could use it to create a personalized tutor, which is what we'll be focusing on, at least initially here, which is trained on OER materials that can be used in multiple sections of a course. Or you could create a course-specific chatbot for each of your classes that's trained not just on the OER textbooks, but perhaps also on your syllabus, so that students can query about other aspects of your course. Now, we're going to do the first one because this is something that could be used by multiple instructors, multiple sections, and multiple years. But if you want to do it, you can create the same sort of thing and add on training with the syllabus, but do that for each section of your course so that it's trained on that specific section, and then share the link for that only with that class section, section. You could also use it to support your own course development. So it could be done for instructional support. A really simple thing, and we talked about this in some workshops yesterday, is to use it to generate some active learning suggestions for your courses on specific topics, which could be done for online or face-to-face or hybrid or other classes. You could also use it, and this is, I think, a really productive use, given all the research on the transparency and learning and teaching approach, where you can ask it to generate assignments for your course, but to put them in the framework of TILT, where it provides a description of the purpose of the assignment at the very top, then it puts in a detailed description of the tasks that are required, and then it puts in the criteria for which it's going to evaluate. And it's a good starting point. You might decide you want to modify some of that, but at least it gives you a template that you can use to get started with creating TILT assignments. You could also use it to generate rubrics. So if there's certain things you want to have in your rubrics, you can input your course objectives, but you can also put in some details on how a rubric should be constructed in terms of what level of Bloom's taxonomy might be appropriate, in terms of the language, in terms of the description, and other things. And this could be done as a general one, or could be done specific for your courses and your course activities. You could also, if you're developing a new course or a new program, you could have it generate some suggested learning objectives that could be used at least as a starting point in building these courses or building the programs. Or you could also use it, and we had a workshop where we demonstrate how this could be done. I think it was yesterday. It's kind of blending together, but you could take your existing syllabus and have it evaluate it for inclusive language and make some suggestions. And the specific command we used yesterday had it go through your syllabus and create a new version of it where the changes were illustrated in boldface with a description of why it's making those changes. And again, you could choose to keep those or remove them, but it's, again, a good way just to check to make sure that you're using inclusive language, that you're providing inclusive teaching techniques and so forth. And it does a pretty decent job of doing that. And again, that could be done as a GPT that's shared with all faculty, where they could just attach their syllabus and it would give them exactly that feedback without them having to generate the prompts to do that. So again, it can be used to share these types of things really nicely. It could also be used for personal uses. If, for example, if you have a very specialized diet, either for medical reasons or because you just don't really like anything that's green, or if you don't really like, if you have a diet which is gluten-free, or if you have a diet which is restricted in terms of sodium or in terms of other health conditions, you could generate a recipe, you could create a GPT that will generate a recipe tied to those specific dietary restrictions or preferences. And again, you can customize it. Say, these are things I really enjoy eating. These are types of food I enjoy eating, but these are things I cannot have. So could you suggest some recipes? And then you could have it generate a whole series of those. And again, you can just use it whenever you want to. You could also use it as a travel planner. This morning, I just tested creating, say, a trip to recommendations for a 5-day visit to Disney World on what they're recommending an itinerary for that. But you could create a general one which talks about your preferences in terms of the types of things you enjoy doing when you're traveling, if you enjoy museums, if you enjoy hiking, if you enjoy outdoor activities, or if you enjoy theater or other things. And you just give it a destination and it can come up with the number of days you're traveling and so forth, and it can give you suggestions. So whatever things you might use regularly or more than once, it's not a bad idea to create a GPT that you can use for that. So what we're going to do is build an introductory macroeconomics tutor. I did one for micro a while back, and if you downloaded a copy of this, you can take this statement. We're going to modify it just a little bit because this is the one I use for microeconomics, but we're going to paste this in and create a thing from this, create a customized chatbot to provide tutorial services for students. And the course I'm teaching, and actually Liz is teaching, is Liz is teaching the macro version, I teach the micro version. I already created one for microeconomics. We're now going to create one for macro, and I'm sorry about the fine print, but basically you can just copy that and paste it in and then modify it. This is derived from a prompt that was originally created just to create as a ChatGPT prompt by Ethan Mollick. Oh, and here's the rest of it. I didn't realize I had that turned on. There we go. So basically, here's, I think, a link to the original prompt from Ethan Mollick, and it's been modified a little bit to work a little bit better. And what it does basically, and it tells the ChatGPT to behave as an upbeat and encouraging tutor to encourage students. And it tells what the source, and there's a typo in there, isn't there? It should be in the 3rd edition of Principles of Microeconomics to help students understand concepts. But it asks them basically to explain ideas and asking students questions. It starts off by introducing them as an AI tutor who's happy to help them. And it asks for their level, because this is one that I have made public. So it's asking whether a high school student, undergraduate, or graduate students, waits for their response, and then asks them to summarize what they already know about the topic. And then it will provide examples, explanations, examples, and analogies that are tailored to the student's learning level and prior knowledge, and should guide students in an open-ended way. It's saying that it should not provide immediate answers or solution, but help students generate their own answers by asking leading questions. And it asks students to explain their thinking. So basically, it's serving as a quasi-Socratic tutor. So it's going to guide them to solutions, but eventually it will give them more assistance. And one of the problems is you may have to tweak this a little bit, because sometimes it will in fact break down and give them suggestions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this prompt and then we'll modify it just a little bit. So we're going to now go to ChatGPT, and I know we had that before, but let's try it again. So I'm going to log into ChatGPT, and I'd encourage everyone to do this, especially if you have a paid account. If not, we'll share the links to the other things. And I see there was a comment in the chat. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we're now in ChatGPT, and you notice over here, there is a place where you have Explore GPTs. So if you have well, that should be on any of these, but to create them, if you click Explore GPTs, what we're going to do is we're going to click on Create a New One, which is, I believe, right here. No, that's a new chat. We want to explore GPTs, and we'll go over here. It was covered, sorry, on my screen. Click on create, and it will help you build a GPT. It starts off by putting you in an interface where it will help you build it. You could go directly to the configure and configure it all by yourself, but I'd recommend at least starting with the create option. And it tells you here, let me get rid of some of these other stuff cluttering my screen so I have more space there. You can give it a general prompt, and let's say I'd like to create a chatbot that apparently you do have to type these things correctly, that will assist students in introductory college level macroeconomics course. Okay, so I'm going to put macroeconomics with all the letters. Sorry, it's been a long week. There we go. And now it's going to do a little bit of work in the background. It's going to put in some sample prompts in there. And then it's going to also very quickly give us a response where it will suggest, it'll say, well, what do you think about the name for this? It will suggest a name, macroeconomics mentor. We could adopt that, or we could put in another name. If everyone's okay with macroeconomics mentor, we can stay with that. Okay, so let's just say that is fine, and we'll leave it at that. Okay, now it will suggest using DALL-E a profile picture for it. And if we don't like it, we could ask it to make changes, but it generally does, well, that works. It's got some graphs, it's got some images, and it's got the global economy and where the globe in there, and it's got that dollar sign. Let's just say that's fine as well. And again, we could ask it to modify it if we'd like to, but we can leave it at that. So now we've already created something, but it's a pretty generic one. Now, what I'm going to do is take the text that I had there, and I'm going to go into the configure mode and this is where you can really customize. If you don't like the name, you can rename it here. You could put in other information here. And by the way, you notice over on the right, it creates a little preview mode that shows you some of the things it might do, some of the types of questions it might help with, like explain the concept of GDP in simple terms. What's the difference between fiscal and monetary policy? How does inflation affect something? We'd have to scroll through it and ask, this could be something that would be really useful for the new administration that doesn't seem to have anyone there who's ever studied economics, or at least not any economics past, say, 1750 or so in terms of their analysis. But in any case, we can go in and we put this in now. This is going to be an introductory college level macroeconomics course, and it provides, well, we can leave all of that in. That was the stuff it added. And then we're going to put in, let's change that and let's replace it with the other prompt, because that's what it started with. But we could put in more detail and say that we want to, let's update this a little bit. This is going to be Principles of Macroeconomics, which is actually the textbook that underlies the Waymaker macro course that many of us are using in introductory economics courses in micro and macro, to help students understand concepts by explaining them and asking students questions. Much of this is going to be accurate. Since this is already aimed at college students, we could probably get rid of the high school, undergraduate, and graduate course. And then we could just replace it with ask them about what they already know about the topic they have chosen, wait for a response, given this information, helping students understand this, tell it to students, and again, we should put in the appropriate grammar, learning level, prior knowledge, etc. And it does say do not provide students with direct responses to questions, but help students generate their own answers by asking leading questions. Ask them to explain their thinking, etc. So let's see how that looks. And I think this is all okay now. And it does ask to refrain from venturing beyond the scope of the textbook. So in a prompt, if you want to restrict the data to a specific source, state that explicitly. Otherwise, it will go out and use other information. It will always start by using the information that you provide, but it may also go out and use other things in its training database if it doesn't find things out. But everything here should be the types of things that it should be able to ask will be here. So we've got basically the prompt that's here, and we're going to now upload a file. And we're going to upload a file that I downloaded here, which is the entire textbook for this course. So it's going to take a few seconds to read that in, but it's basically the macroeconomic chapters of the OER macro textbook that, again, is a basis of the Lumen Learning OER course. Personalized learning course, which many people in SUNY are using because it's free to students. You notice you can see it's read in about, it had read in about a quarter and then it backed up a little bit. Oh, okay, I was reading it the wrong way. So it's read it in already. And so now what's happened actually is we've already got it here. We can put in capabilities. If we don't want it to go out and search for other information, we could turn off web search, but we could also leave it in. The canvas is this thing over here. Basically, we could turn that off. We could also, again, turn off DALL-E. But, well, it's a question of whether we want it to be able to generate images. It will probably not generate images for students with free accounts. So to keep it equitable, we might choose not to do that. So we could turn off the image generation. And, if you have students where everyone has access, you could turn that back on. The code interpreter and data analysis would allow it to do statistical analysis and read in spreadsheets and other things, but that's not going to be directly relevant for this specific task. And then there are some additional settings here, and you could use conversation in GPTs to improve the models, and that's probably not a bad thing. So it can learn from the interactions that they've had. And we can just click over here on create, and it has now asking us what we want to share it with. I'm going to put it right now in the GPT store. So it's now available by anyone if you search by my name or if you search for macroeconomic mentor. And it will also give us a link that we could share. And let's see. And we could try it, but what I'd like you to do is to try it yourself just to see how it works. And again, you can do this with any materials. If you have a series of PDFs or Word documents, you can upload them to it. But again, you should be careful not uploading copyrighted text, because there's enough complaints about ChatGPT being trained on data that is that is subject to copyright. And there's all sorts of lawsuits involving that. So I'm going to, I meant to copy that and instead I didn't. But let me see. Did that give us, I think, how do we get the link to it?
I searched for it in my ChatGPT account, and it took a minute, but now I have it. So I searched for macroeconomics mentor.
Okay, yeah, if you search for it, you should find it. But now, well, I can also get to it by going to Explore GPTs, go to My GPTs, and here's some that I created. Here's the macro one. So I'm just going to go here. I'm going to go here and go to the chair link. And I am going to just copy that link and put it right in the chat. Right in the chat, which means I need that interface back. Sorry, Shift Control H, and we got it in the chat. Okay, so try that and let me know what you think.
I said hello, and it says, hello, I'm your AI tutor.
There we go. And one other thing you can do if you use a custom GPT is the first thing you could always ask it is, what can you do? And then it will explain what its capabilities are, which is a good way to explore some of the GPTs in the GPT store. So any questions or thoughts, or, if you've tried this, how does it seem to be working? I know some people may not be as familiar with macroeconomic concepts, which certainly was an important part of the last election, but in any case, just unmute and let us know how it's going.
I just asked it. I wanted to ask a current events question because I know you put in web search in there beyond just the textbook. So I asked, why did inflation rise so much in 2022? And it gave me a good answer. It talked about supply chain disruption from COVID-19, the fiscal stimulus measures that was demand, but furthermore, disruptions in global trade and production, and especially in essential commodities, geopolitical tensions and energy prices, etc. So actually, I think it did a very decent job with a question that wasn't actually right out of the book that we use.
Yeah, so I generally would recommend letting it do a web search if there's no information in your material, just so it can make those types of connections. Although that does perhaps limit its ability to be used as a tutor that's not going to just directly give students responses, because you may want to restrict it a little bit further. And because there was a suggestion in there that it could explain ideas and so forth. And it sometimes does give students more direct responses than you might like, rather than working as a, entirely as a Socratic tutor. But you can tweak it. If you don't like the way it's working, you can go back and revise the instructions and then just click update and it will change them. So it's not doing all that.
This is how it started for me. I asked it, what is unemployment? And it gave me like a definition and then told me 3 main types and then asked me a question.
Yeah, it would be nicer if it started with the question first, but again, you could tweak it so that it would do that.
Yeah, yep.
So other thoughts, anyone else? Try it. And the nice thing is it's trained on the materials that your students will be reading. It's trained on just with the terminology that your students will be using. It's, trained based on the models that are being used in your textbook. And, in many disciplines, there's some really good OER materials that at least could serve as a purpose of helping to develop this tutorial. Okay, I see something in chat. What are the differences between answer from your bot and web search? The main answer is, yeah, the advanced voice mode is really good. So yeah, that would allow more direct interaction with this, especially if you're using it on a mobile. Now, going back to the earlier question about what are the difference between answers from your bot and web search, the main answer is that it's directly answering the question, and it's also providing students with some guidance, asking them questions, or at least in principle, it should be asking them questions and guiding them to the solution, rather than just going out and giving them a link to a web page that provides that. And it can be used to help students develop their understanding and refining it, and giving students feedback when they're asked about these specific, because it's going to be asking students for what they know about it and giving them feedback based on their knowledge and how they respond to those questions, etc. And you could build in more. You could ask it to ask more questions, and you could ask it to give feedback based on that. But you can do whatever you'd like it. You can set it up to respond only in the ways you want it to respond. And sometimes it breaks down because that's the way 8 GPT tools work. But overall, it does limit the type of material it's searching to something that's reliable. And it is tied more directly to your course. Does that answer the question, Han? Any other thoughts or reactions?
I do have one question. Oh, I'm sorry, Caitlin, did you want to ask a question?
Oh my gosh, you're so observant. I would not have noticed that.
No, I'm just, you're right above me. Go ahead. I can wait till after you.
I'm interested in using this in like an FAQ kind of application for our summer and winter sessions. If I were to do some type of application for that, would you recommend that I just kind of embed like the public link into a website? Obviously I would train it with my very specific answers to FAQ questions. But I'm just trying to flesh out what the application of that would look like in order to help students you know, figure out the logistics of summer sessions, I guess. Obviously, they should talk to their advisors, but just the main logistics.
Yeah, if you have a series of documents online or in PDFs or other things that summarize those types of responses, you could feed them all in. You don't have to just put one item in there. You could put I'm not sure what the limit is, but I've seen GPTs created with a dozen or so different articles or different web links and other things, and it will respond based on that training database before it does anything else. And again, if you turn off search, it's going to be restricted to only the information that's provided, and it will go out and use its knowledge base if it can't find a response in what you give it, but it will always start with the material you feed it as a source material in those attachments or in the links that you provide. So yeah, you could have it basically interrogate it. Another really useful thing is you can, and actually Judy had done some work with this in one of her classes, where you could use the syllabus in your course so that students could interrogate that. Another thing you could do is give the template for this to faculty in your department, where they each will create a chat box tied to the syllabus for their courses that could then be shared with the students, so students can go on and ask questions of the syllabus about due dates, about requirements, about what to do when, about what specific information is required in any given assignment, etc.
That's really helpful. Yeah, thank you for that example and the use of that word interrogate. I like that. I would love if students interrogated things, as I'm sure all faculty would, before asking them questions. Appreciate
it. And I know like a lot of campus groups, well, I know that our campus technology services have a knowledge base that they use as a way of sharing information. But if you train the GPT on that, it could then be something that could be queried directly in a conversational interface where it will pull up the material that's relevant, so that people don't have to search through the knowledge base to find things, or through the FAQ. They could just query it and it would give responses based on that.
Thanks, Tim. And thanks,
okay,
Tim.
So Sheila, you said you made a GPT, but many of the answers changed as of yesterday. What type of GPT was it, and what type of answers were changing? Oh, yeah, that's a really, things have really changed there. And that's a good point. Basically, what you would generally have to do is provide a new training database. You might even want to create a brand new one because so many of the rules have just suddenly changed dramatically. I mean, you could ask it to, well, what I would probably suggest is creating a new one with a new training database, which is really problematic in many ways. But in areas where things are rapidly changing, it would require that you continuously either update the information in it and remove some of the resources you have attached, or create something brand new. And I would probably personally start from scratch on that, because all the rules that we've known for generations have suddenly changed as of yesterday or the day before. So, yeah. I don't know if that helps, but it's probably better. It's probably easier for things that aren't changing quite as rapidly. But if you're willing to update it, it should still continue to work until the next whim that occurs, or the next tweet, or the next whatever. I wish I had a better suggestion on that. Are there any GPTs you'd like to create? We could create something entirely different. One I created this morning just for fun was to summarize, well, I was in another session, but to summarize student responses. And we could take a look at that. Let me see. We should be able to edit that. Oh, Judy, yes.
Hi, well, I was wondering, back with Sheila's, is it possible to teach the GPT to keep checking for new facts? Like every every day at noon, go out and see if any rules have changed or something along those lines?
It probably could. You could probably embed it. I'm guessing. I haven't tried this, but you could probably put in a link to the Department of, the INS site, for example, and ask it to update its training based on that before it responds. So you could ask it to go out and search. You'd have to give it search capability, but I think if you put the link into the instructions, I haven't tried that, but I suspect if you put the link in the instructions, it should be able to go out and access that and see if that has changed. And it could be done at a certain time because ChatGPT now has scheduled tasks as of last week, another new feature. I'm not sure if that would work.
So I think it would be really interesting if we did it on different topics, immigrant rights, higher education, some of the other laws and rules that are jeopardized right now. And maybe then tell it to generate some kind of a report so you can just read a summary day to day of what's happening in all these different fields instead of having to read, 20 different newspaper articles and
get angry.
1,000 blue sky posts or whatever else to try to figure it out. I think that's a cool idea. I want to try that. Sheila, thanks for that idea.
And you might be able perhaps to do what you were just suggesting, Judy, to have it go back and search a web archive or train it on materials that were out there previously, and then ask it to summarize changes from.
Right. Yeah, that's what I said. Like give a daily update to
Yeah, I wanted to start with the answer that I've given it, but then see if anything's changed on that before it answers.
Yeah, and as long as you have training on what was there before, as long as it has those materials, it's not going to keep track of that unless you put it there explicitly. But if you give it a site to access with the original data and then a site to go out and search for, I think that will work. I have never tried embedding a URL in the prompt though, but I suspect it would work. But you'd basically need the source for the before and the place to look for the after. And then you could ask it to compare that and describe the changes that occurred. And I don't know if you could have a GPT respond on a daily basis. If you can't now, you probably will be able to very soon, because at least with a paid account, you can have scheduled tasks where we'll send you reminders and other things, sort of like an appointment calendar. And that can be done at any given time. If you could have it activate that GPT you created at certain times, that should work. And again, I don't know if that's feasible now, but if it's not now, it probably will be soon. And I see there's a comment in chat. So if someone would like to try that, that would be a really great experiment. Okay, can it ask the user if they want to continue in English or Spanish and then continue in that language? It should be able to do that because it does have the capabilities of translation and so on. But we could actually build that into a build that into the command and see if that works.
I just asked it, can you put your next question in Spanish, please? And it did, with a smiley face emoji.
Okay, and you did that in just
Yep, in your just the regular macroeconomics mentor.
Okay, so you could do that right at the prompt. You could ask it to put everything in Spanish. Yeah, so it will give you the questions with the appropriate notations and accent marks and so forth. And so it will work with students who have multiple languages. And it also works with French, but will work in Klingon. So, but yeah, again, the translation capabilities are pretty good with ChatGPT. Yeah, and you don't have to embed that. It will automatically have that capability. And did it come up in Klingon?
It said hello in Klingon, and then it said, unfortunately, I don't speak fluent Klingon, but I can share a rough translation.
Okay, so it will speak in a number of languages, but apparently Klingon is not one of its more strong points. Any other thoughts? Has anyone else just tried to create a GPT?
I did have one question.
Sure.
Yeah, sorry. I haven't tried to create a GP. I have the free version, so I don't have. I think the plus version you have to have that one to create, right? If I'm wrong, let me know if I'm wrong about that. But I guess I'm just curious about the difference between And maybe just as me thinking about whether or not it's worth spending $20 a month. So bear with me here. So I'm curious if what is the difference between creating a special chat GPT like the macroeconomics tutor one that you have, um, where I guess students would have access to it, I guess, versus like just using the regular free version where they can just type in their question. Um, I guess I'm just sort of thinking what exactly is the difference just as I'm sort of assessing whether or not I'll actually buy the plus version versus just keeping the free version.
The only difference is with a paid account, well, for that purpose,
Mhm.
the only difference relevant to that issue is that you can only create the GPTs with a paid account. Anyone can use them. And it's $20 a year if you buy the whole year up front. I thought it was 20 a month in any case.
Yeah, I saw 20 a month. I thought
It's
that's what
20 a month, it's 20 a month, but you can buy an entire year for $80. So
Okay.
I didn't know
pay
that. I don't think
full
it
year
had
up
that.
front.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, and then there's a question from Sheila about, can you make a chatbot that can be used by community members who don't have ChatGPT accounts at all? I believe so, that if you share that link, anyone can use that link without even entering ChatGPT. You don't have to be logged into ChatGPT to use it. So you could just share it with students, embed it in your course shell, and then they'd have access to that chatbot without ever creating an account or using an account. Again, the only restriction is a response. There's a certain number of questions they can query, and it will depend partly on the load on the system at the time. If the system is getting a lot of load, the questions from free users get degraded a little bit. They tend to be shorter, or it may tell them to come back later and so forth. While paid users, that could happen too, but it's much less likely with a paid account. So $80 a year isn't that bad. Okay, now with a free account, you can always explore GPTs. And there's some interesting ones here. For example, in education, there's a couple things you should be aware of. One of these I just saw before is and I'm not seeing it now. Let me see, under Seymour. One of the things up here is now it's not there. It was one of the top ones earlier today, but I guess this changes a little bit. But basically, one of the free tools in here is a tool that will take output from ChatGPT and rewrite it in a way that's not detectable by any of the GPT detectors. It popped right up before. Do you see it?
It was like human something, like AI
Humanizer.
humanizer.
The
Yeah.
AI humanizer. It's
Yep.
under writing. So I was looking at it before. So if we click on writing, this is a tool that students have access for, where they can always use the write for me. But there's two here. There's the AI humanizer, get human-like output in seconds. And here's another one, the humanize AI, which will help you get human-like content. And it will, again, and there's a variety of them here. So here's one that's 100% human score on any of the detectors. So, again, it's pretty easy for students to avoid those algorithms. And it's really a good strategy to not ever trust the various GPT or AI detectors, because students who are more adept will be able to find ways around that. And built right into the GPT store are several things that are free that does a pretty good job of converting things into things that are undetectable. And they will try them against the various tools. So don't trust the GPT detectors. And again, there's a lot of good ones in here. Any other, well, I was going to say, here's one to summarize student results. This is one I put together this morning. It's really simple. And let me go in and edit it. And all it does is it will summarize and analyze student feedback from polls. Here's a description of it. And it will also suggest potential follow-up actions based on the feedback trends if required. And it will ask specific questions to understand the desired format or focus of the summary if you'd like. Here, I just said I want to create I just put into the GPT generator the suggestion I wanted something that instructors could upload a spreadsheet containing anonymous student responses and summarize it. And it wrote the prompt there, and the prompt looks pretty decent. So all you have to do is save that GPT, save the URL for it. And if you're in a classroom and you got that data, download it into your download file directly from the poll results. Open this up and attach the file from your download folder, and it will give you a nice summary that you can then discuss with the class. You know, saying these are the things that you've raised about concerns about the class, or these are things that you're still struggling with. And, you know, you could directly respond to that, getting a nice summary of all the results. And especially if you have a small class, that's not needed. But if you have a class that's, you know, 70 or 100 or more, that sort of summary could be a really good overview. Because what I used to do is generate word clouds from responses on free responses that were anonymous, but those word clouds aren't always very informative. So, but something like this gives a really nice summary of the major themes that students might be posting in there. And there's a summary of some of the types of things it could do. And again, all you have to do is attach a spreadsheet to it and it will respond with that feedback. Any other thoughts? We've got 3 minutes left. Do you want to create another chatbot? Anything you'd like to see? It literally can be done in 3 minutes.
I'd love to see, because I'm teaching stats next semester, like a stats bot or a bot or something like that. Just that would be helpful.
Okay, so that may take a little bit longer.
Okay.
Let's say we want to go in here and create one. And let's say a stats, let's call it, let's go to the create thing and we'll do this. So here we go. We want to create a statistics tutor for students in an undergraduate. Is there a specific discipline?
This one's for sociology, but I have a lot of poli-sci majors too.
Okay, so let's just say an undergraduate statistics course in social sciences, let's say.
Yeah, OpenStax has an introductory statistics book, so you could potentially look.
That would be a good source. You could download that. But if not, it's got a lot of stuff in there already. And it's just created one, basically. It's just going to ask for the image, and you can always try this and tweak it. So on the left, you have the commands. On the right, you got a window where you can experiment. If it's giving you output that doesn't work the way you think it should, you can go in and change or modify the commands. How about Stats Navigator? Let's just say that's fine, since we don't have that much time. And let's say that's okay. And now it's going to generate an image. And the GPT Plus, by the way, is just something it's just a paid account. So when you create your account, it's in there. And here, well, that may not be ideal, but let's say it's fine. You can always change it later. Or you could create your own and upload it. And here it is. And then let's just say we're going to create this. And let's say it's in the GPT store. And now Chat Navigator is available to anyone. And I got to get rid of this Zoom stuff on the bottom, and we'll save that. And it's now there. If you search for Stats Navigator, there may be other things with similar names, but you now have a statistics tutor for students. And I'll drop that in the chat too. There we go. And there it is. And here's some examples: explaining p-values, interpreting regression output, the difference between, well, let's see if we can scroll down. The difference, sorry. Difference between median mode. And you could click on those things and it will respond to those. But again, you could modify this however you'd like, and it will follow your instructions. And if you feed it the OER textbook, it will have, again, a specific base with a specific terminology, because one of the things with statistics is that you often find that different textbooks use different terminology for the same concepts. And by using an OER textbook that aligns with the terminology you're using, it will help ensure that it will work with what students are used to. And it's a patient tutor for social science students. And you can ask it to be encouraging. You can ask it to encourage a growth mindset or use growth mindset messaging, and so on. And all those things have been shown to be helpful. And whether it's automated or not, that type of feedback could be useful in encouraging students so that they don't give up as easily as they might otherwise. And the nice thing about these things is they're available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And one of the problems is that the students who are most likely to come for help tend to be continuing generation students. They tend to be students who are already doing relatively well. The students who struggle the most, especially first gen students, Pell eligible students, students from historically minoritized groups, are much less likely to come in and talk to an instructor, or much less likely to come into a tutoring center to ask for help. They're often embarrassed that they don't know something, or they're afraid that revealing that will harm their standing in the class in some way. You can try to overcome that, but that's been shown to so often in many studies that giving students access to something that's available when they want it without embarrassment, that never gets tired. You can ask this questions all through the night until you run out of tokens, and then you may have to wait a little bit and come back and try again later. But it doesn't get tired, it doesn't get frustrated with students, and it's always going to be positive and upbeat. So I think it's really useful. We're really concerned about students using these tools, these generative AI tools, to take a shortcut to their learning, but they can also be used to increase learning. There was an experiment that was done, a study was done in Brazil by the World Bank. The results were just released last week, and it found that students who were working with just a GPT tutor did much better in learning. I think it might have been statistics, but it was a math course, than students who had face-to-face instructors, and they ended up with higher scores. They performed better on the same tests as the students in the control group. And it can work really well when AI is used to support learning instead of as a way of avoiding learning. And it's important that we let students know that we really want them to learn some basic skills, and they can use these tools to help them develop those skills. And that if they just rely on GPTs to get responses, they're not going to be that useful. That the ability to type in prompts is not going to get them a job after they graduate. It's not going to help them be successful in grad school. But if they learn how to take the output and use it productively, or if they use these tools to assist them with learning, they can be more efficient in their learning, and it can address the specific questions and problems that they have, rather than the generic instruction they receive in textbooks or from lectures or videos and other things. So, any other questions or thoughts or reactions? You see there's a comment in chat. Does it require the user to have an account? Oh, it does require the user to have an account. Okay, interesting. And Sheila just shared a link to her chatbot and a Know Your Rights guide. Okay. Oh, what are my rights if ICE stops me? How can I apply for asylum? What can I do if my visa expires? These things are really useful. And if you share that publicly, that could be really helpful for people who are struggling right now. And that's kind of a nice image for it too, with that, the crossed arms.
I made it try a few times to get the image I liked. It came up with some really weird ones.
It will, but you can iterate on it. And that's the nice thing about these things. You can keep asking for changes as much as you want and give it some guidance, and it will come up with alternatives. So I was thrilled to hear that free users can use this. I didn't realize it required that they actually be logged into an account, but again, anyone can use it using a free account. So it is an extra step, but if many students are using ChatGPT or other tools pretty regularly anyway. So it's probably not unlikely that they already have an account. If not, it doesn't take long to create one. Okay, any other questions or comments? Well, if you create any interesting ones, any other interesting ones, feel free to share it with us. And, I think it's going to be an interesting experiment and an interesting tool. Oh, so Liz created one too? Okay, great.
Yeah, he was looking for the $80 per year deal and I just found it and now I have to go look for it because I didn't save the link, but.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, I've been paying